All right, what's up, guys? So a few years ago, I spent a lot of time trying to get into shape. I had tried all the different diets. I watched a bunch of different videos on YouTube, but it just seemed like I was spinning my wheels for so long. It was really frustrating because I was putting in all this effort, but it just felt like I could never really crack the code to getting a good body. And eventually this led to me kind of taking the black pill mindset and thinking that I was just not someone who was going to be able to achieve it. It was my genetics. I just didn't have it in the cards for me until eventually I was able to actually figure out the truth, which is that anybody can get into great shape. And so I was able to implement a couple of key principles that are actually very simple and implement that into my life so that I was able to lose 45 pounds in about 180 days. It really was the switch that flipped that really made all the difference. And I've been in pretty great shape ever since then. So in this video, I'll share those principles with you and I'll tell you exactly how you can do it as well. All right, guys, and just so you know, this is what I used to look like. I like to show this in all of my videos just because I want you to know that I actually did make a transformation and just give you a little bit of proof of the process. Like you can see, just had a pretty average physique, a little bit overweight, didn't have very much muscle mass on me, and just generally pretty unhealthy lifestyle that I was living at that time. But the good news is by making just a few simple changes, I was able to completely reinvent my physique. And as you can see, I was able to lose quite a bit of body fat and gain quite a bit of muscle mass and just overall live a much healthier lifestyle. And the cool thing about this, guys, is like I was saying earlier, if I can do it, anyone can. All right, so there's gonna be three main things that we're gonna talk about in today's video, three main fundamental principles that allowed me to lose 45 pounds of fat in roughly about 6 months. And I'll tell you exactly what the main things were that I did, but the first thing that we'll talk about is what I like to call micro switches. Micro switches are the things that allowed me to start off small, but really compounded as time went on. I know that starting a new diet can be pretty intimidating to the beginner, and so I think that these micro switches are going to be really helpful for people who are just starting off. My starting micro switches that I made was just really small things that didn't really seem like big changes, but actually add up to make quite a bit of difference. So like, for instance, I switched out regular soda for diet soda. I switched out whole milk for almond milk in my coffee. I did sugar-free syrup. I'd use Splenda instead of actual sugar. And I did low-calorie sauces. So instead of throwing like a bunch of Chick-fil-A sauce on my food, I would put like hot sauce or soy sauce. And the cool thing about these decisions is that they save me quite a bit of calories throughout the day. It would be like 300 to 500 calories that I would save daily by just switching up my coffee order or using Splenda as sweetener or switching to low-calorie sauces. And I feel like I still got about 80% of the enjoyment that I would have if I was still just using all the other stuff. But it was like 20% or maybe even less than 20% of the actual calories. So you can see that these small micro decisions, these small micro switches that I made add up to make quite a big difference. And this is one thing I want to talk about because I think people have this idea that dieting means that you have to eat the bad tasting healthy foods. You have to eat all the stuff that tastes really gross and that you don't like. This is wrong. And if you go about a diet this way, you're inevitably going to fall off the diet because who would want to continuously eat stuff that they don't like to eat for the rest of their life? If that was the case, I would have fallen off the diet a long time ago. Matter of fact, guys, I had pancakes and ice cream for dinner last night, but the difference is that I just used Kodiak protein pancakes and used a scoop of protein powder, and I made a Ninja Creamy ice cream that was basically just protein powder and skim milk. And I had a great time. It was awesome. It was a great experience. It was delicious, but it was probably like half to maybe even 1/3 the calories of if I went out to a restaurant and got pancakes and ice cream. And sure, maybe normal pancakes and ice cream would have tasted a little bit better, but I feel like my version was not that far off. And it's just a good example of like micro decisions to still enjoy my food, but also be able to incorporate it in a healthy way. And the next thing we're going to talk about, guys, is protein plus calorie deficit. I think this is like, I know it's very gym bro, but it's kind of like the holy grail of losing weight and gaining muscle at the same time. A calorie deficit is how you lose body fat. I'm sure you guys probably know that by now, but if you're unfamiliar with what a calorie deficit is, it basically means that the amount of calories that you consume on a day-to-day basis is less than the amount of calories that you burn. So imagine that this green graph here is the amount that you consume, this red is the amount that you burned. Well, in order for your body to make up for that deficit, it relies on energy from stored fat. So it actually uses body fat that you have stored to make up the difference between the deficit. So that's literally how you lose body fat. Now, there's a bunch of calorie calculators online. You can literally just look up calorie calculator and it'll pull up a bunch of different ones. It'll ask for your age, your height, your weight, and your activity level. And then it'll literally tell you how many calories you should be eating every single day to be in a healthy deficit. The golden rule is you want to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And if you combine that with your calorie deficit goal, that is literally the sweet spot. Guys, that is actually how I built my physique. That is how I got lean. That's how I got jacked, is I just got into a healthy calorie deficit and I ate enough protein. And just to give you a rough idea, 500 calorie deficit per day will equal about 1 pound of fat loss per week. So you can extrapolate that to your goal weight. You can figure out what your goal weight is, and then you can extrapolate a 500 calorie deficit per day to figure out how long it would take you to get to your goal weight if you're losing 1 pound of fat per week. I don't really recommend going over 500 calorie deficit per day. You can if you're like ultra disciplined, but if you're just a beginner, I would say 500 calorie deficit per day is probably the max you want to do. Just because if you go over that, the hunger signaling gets a lot more intense. And I would say that anything above a 500 calorie deficit is going to be more for people who are intermediate to advanced lifters. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about today is cardio. Cardio is a big thing that I hear a lot about. And when I did lose 45 pounds in 180 days, I was doing cardio. I personally did do dedicated cardio at the gym during this time, but I don't believe that it's entirely necessary to lose weight. All that doing cardio does is it increases your total calorie expenditure. It just means that you're burning more calories per day, but ultimately to lose body fat, we just need to be in a calorie deficit. So whether you're doing cardio and burning more calories or not doing cardio and burning less calories, just as long as you're below what you're burning, you're gonna lose weight either way. But it does make it a little bit easier if you like to eat a little bit more, just to raise your total daily calorie expenditure. What I was doing at this time was about 20 to 30 minutes on the Stairmaster every day. If you don't like to do dedicated cardio, that's totally okay. And I really like this approach now, but just if you're not gonna do dedicated cardio, just try to focus on getting about 10,000 steps per day. However, with all that being said, if you are gonna do dedicated cardio, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing weight training over cardio. We wanna do weights about 3 times a week, at least 45 minutes. And then if you're gonna do cardio that day, make sure you do it after the weights, because we wanna prioritize the weights, because I've said this before, I'll say it again. When we are in a fat loss period, our main goal should be to maintain or even gain muscle mass. Because when we get lean, we want to have the adequate amount of muscle mass to show off and look aesthetic. So if you're going to do dedicated cardio, do the weights first and then do the cardio after. But yeah, guys, this is pretty much the way that I was able to lose all that weight in that amount of time. Now, a lot of people ask me at this point, like, Alex, what about the dedicated workouts? What about like what you eat on a day-to-day basis? If you guys are interested in that, I actually just wrote an entire book called The Aesthetic Protocol. It's everything I know about fitness, just designed to walk you step by step how to get the body of your dreams. I spent a lot of time on it, but it's about the price of a couple cups of coffee. So if you're interested in getting a more in-depth walkthrough approach on how to get a great body, then go check that out in the description. But otherwise, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. I have a goal of hitting 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're absolutely crushing it right now. So thank you so much for that, guys. So make sure you like, subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.